Hello, everybody. Good evening. This is an incredible crowd. It sort of feels like a Washington, D.C. version of a rock concert. Thank you all for being here. I am Margaret Lowe. I'm president of Atlantic Live, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this Washington Ideas kickoff event, our debate wash party. The atmosphere is definitely festive. My favorite moment so far is I was over in the corner watching people get their pictures taken, and there was a gentleman sporting a yarmulke, and with his fist in the air, he was saying, "Let's make the yarmulke great again." Anyway, it's a big crowd. We have lots of people here. Feel free to mingle, get drinks while we're talking. A lot of people have been asking, there will be a big screen here, so you will be able to actually watch the debate. We're here to witness what could be one of the most consequential political events of all time. I think, as we all know, the polls are tighter in this race for the White House than almost everybody was predicting. There are estimates that as many as 100 million people will tune in tonight to see Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump square off. We're really in Super Bowl territory. And I think it's fair to say that for a divided nation, watching this debate somehow feels like a uniquely unifying American experience. So we're especially happy to be here with all of you. Before we begin our pre-debate conversation, I want to make the people who made this watch party possible, our underwriters. First of all, Tito's Vodka. Tito's provided us with several specialty cocktails, all kinds of delicious viewing vodkas, shall we call them. And there is plenty of wine and beer, too. So thank you to Tito's. Thank you also to Comcast making tonight possible, and also Washington Ideas Forum. Thank you, Comcast. And with that, it gives me real pleasure to introduce Comcast's Vice President of Government Communications, Senna Fitzmaurice. She's here to say a few words. Senna.
Hi, I'll be especially short because I know none of you like to wait for the cable guy. So on behalf of Comcast and NBC Universal, thank you so much for being here. You know, as a company, we are committed to bringing you the moments that matter. This summer, over 17 days, that was the Olympics. And for some comparison, over 17 days, about 200 million people watched the Olympics. And think of that, half of that number of people are going to watch just tonight. Margaret took a lot of my best points. Election season hasn't been dull. Everybody's watching. This is something that is bringing us together in a fractured media landscape. Tonight, you'll be able to watch it on Twitter or on Facebook or on my favorite network, NBC News, which we'll have on later this evening. And at Comcast, we've invested in technology to make it so that you can watch it on the go, you can watch it on your tablet, you can watch it on your phone, you can watch it wherever. At Washington Ideas Forum later this week, we'll be showing how we're integrating Netflix into your cable box so that you don't, with one click, you'll be able to get that next season of House of Cards really, really easily. Obviously, with Lester Holt hosting the debate tonight, this is a really proud moment for NBC News. This is the first African-American moderator of a presidential debate in 24 years. Gwen Ifill, of course, moderated the VP debates memorably, but we're really excited and really proud that Lester is going to host the debate tonight, and I hope it is a good night. For all of us. And thank you for being here, and we're so proud to be able to be part of this. Thanks to The Atlantic and Aspen.
Thank you, Senna. I'm back with just a few quick notes before we get rolling. First, silence your cell phones if you would. But do keep them close because we'd love you to follow tonight's action on Twitter. We'd also love you to tweet using the hashtag #IdeasForum. During the debate, you can also follow our political blog for instant analysis at theatlantic.com. The debate itself is 90 minutes. Feel free to stick around after. And now, for the run-up to the big event, please welcome our national correspondent, Jim Fallows, who wrote the latest Atlantic cover story. Hello, Jim. The title of Jim's cover story is the question everyone is asking, who will win? There are copies all over the Hamilton. And John Stanton is here. He's the Washington bureau chief for BuzzFeed. Hey, John. And here to lead the conversation is my colleague, Atlantic senior editor Alex Wagner. Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank all of you guys coming for what is either the beginning or the end of the American democracy, based on your party affiliation. There are no better guides than the ones sitting next to me. John and Jim, let's start with game strategy, because I think that's what everybody is wondering. From both of you, I'd like you both to answer this question. What is the better sort of play for Donald Trump tonight? Is it about embarrassing Hillary Clinton, or is it about focusing on his own candidacy? Jim, why don't I start with you?
So your question assumes he has a plan, as opposed to impulse, and so I guess the way he can come out of this looking better than he did 90 minutes earlier is by seeming sane himself and having people say, oh, he was so presidential, blah blah blah, and somehow provoking Hillary Clinton to doing something that she doesn't want to do, doesn't want to, a long tangled email explanation or something of that sort. So if he had a plan, I think it would be to be controlled and calm. But I mean, do you think he has a plan? Do you think anybody has given him a plan?
I actually think that Trump saying, I haven't been practicing and all the other stuff is bluster. I think it's a way of lowering expectations. I think he absolutely, now, Trump's planning and strategy and practice is, I think, probably different than your traditional presidential debate practice, but I absolutely think he has been preparing behind the scenes.
So I would argue that Trump's got to do two things that are kind of contradictory. He's proven clearly that America loves a bully, right? I mean, that's what we get down with bullies now.
We knew that.
Right, yeah. He just like mocks people, makes fun of them, pushes them around, and America eats that shit up, right? And he's got to be that, right? Because he can't go off-brand. Like, that would be really foreign for him and not very natural. It'd be like wearing a not $5,000 but still ill-fitting suit for him. But he's also got to be careful, because the one kind of bully that we don't like in this country is a man that bullies a woman.
Right.
As he also proved during the debates with Carly Fiorina, which is really like the only time he got nailed in the public's mind. Not in terms of how we talked about it, but your actual voters, they didn't like that shit at all. And so he's got to be careful with Hillary. Now, she's got a much higher threshold in the public mind for being bullied, I think, by a man than Carly did, because she's been around for so long and so many people hate her guts already. But that's going to be, I think, his biggest struggle, is to still be himself, but not crossing that line into like a dude pushing a woman around.
Yeah, and I think the Fiorina play is something that the Clinton team, I'm sure, has studied in exhaustive detail. I guess I wonder where you think Hillary Clinton needs to be on this. Is it about, a lot of people have argued this is about her making the sort of the biggest case yet for why she's running for president. Other people have said it's about humiliating Donald Trump. Which do you guys think it is?
I think all she has to do is get him to bully her hard. She needs to make him treat her the way he treated Carly Fiorina, the way he treated the moderator from Megyn Kelly. Thank you very much.
I like that you couldn't remember that.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not a huge fan of Megyn Kelly. But anyway, go ahead.
It feels like it's an eternity ago that happened. But if she can make him act that way, she wins, hands down. Doesn't matter if she could, be like, I killed Vince Foster. No one would remember that, right? Like, they would not. They would just remember him being a jerk to her. So if she can force that out of him, she wins, I think.
Jim?
So I have a reverse triple backflip theory here on the gender challenge for Hillary Clinton, because as we all know, as I talked about in my article a lot, there's just this narrow line that women have to walk in American politics.
Oh, really?
As this has never occurred to you before. But I quote experts, all female, to this effect, how there's a codicil for Texas women like Ann Richards and Molly Ivins, but otherwise. But the exception to that, I think there's two ways in which Donald Trump provides an exception. One is, as John was saying, his personal bullying, which allows her to fight back in the way she did with the Benghazi Commission. And I think the other is that he himself seems just to cower in the face-to-face presence of women who fight back. You know, that's the one, like, think of that time in Flint, Michigan, 10 days ago or so, where the pastor, the female pastor came up and talked him down, and he was so meek. And the next day he was all, oh, you know, she was, you know, I was giving her a hard time. But it's, so I think that the fact that Hillary Clinton does best when bullied, Donald Trump does worst when confronted by an actual woman in his face, I think that gives her an advantage.
I think Jim has an incredible piece in The Atlantic, which is also available online, though we encourage you to subscribe to the magazine. And you're right. Most people I spoke with recommended a picador-like mocking approach, designed not to confront Trump directly, but to cumulatively provoke him into an outburst. What does that look like? Is that sort of like casual, like sort of ribbing every other response, or what exactly does that approach mean?
So if you think back to Hillary Clinton's, think back to the sequence from the Republican convention, which we were at and was frightening for, you know, humanity, and the Democratic convention, because the Republican convention, it really seemed like Trump was on a roll. The Democratic convention, they had this panorama of a different kind of America, and Hillary Clinton with a very wry, almost Obama-like mocking of Trump, a man who can be, you know, taunted by provoked by a tweet, et cetera. And I think if she could be picador-like, make fun of the things that he is most sensitive about. Number one, that he's not really rich.
Yeah.
And number two, that he's not really smart. Those are the two things that drive him crazy.
Here's the only problem I think that she has with this, and this is like a huge challenge for her, is he is definitely not, he's very adverse to personal confrontation, like physical confrontation with somebody. If you look at, like, most of his debates, he did not really punch very hard at anybody except for John Kasich, because he just kept kicking him in the shins over and over again, and he finally started going a little bananas. But the one person that got under his skin, but actually got under his skin well, was Chris Christie. And that's because Chris Christie has this giant personality,
right,
and he can kind of play that, like, you know, oh, I'm a, you know, Italian gangster from Sopranos guy, right? And like, which is what Trump kind of wants to be, really, if he grows up ever. And like, and I think that's the kind of person that can make Trump step off and like get into a fight with them in public and then lose. Hillary does not have in the personality wattage to pull that off. She just doesn't. Like, she's not a big enough like force in a room to just destroy him like that. And I think that's going to be her biggest challenge, is finding a way to not try to be Chris Christie, but to still...
Well, but, and you also think she needs to get, I mean, this sounds so messed up,
yeah.
but she needs to get bullied to win. So she can't be Chris Christie.
No, that's right. But I mean, I think also, like, Chris Christie got under his skin, and, you know, he would react towards him, and he would look kind of small. But Chris Christie was able just to call him small, like, to his face, and the world was like, yeah, that's right. He is.
Jim, if you are doing debate prep with Clinton, what is your biggest concern about her vulnerability? Is it a question about transparency, about the Clinton Foundation, about Bill Clinton's record? What is it?
So I think there's nothing in her role as debater that's really vulnerable. I have, as I've confessed to people, I think I've watched every debate she's ever done, you know, starting back with the debates against Lazio and the ones at Obama 8 years ago, and all through this cycle, and she has gotten really good at it. I mean, she's never really dramatic and sort of Abe Lincoln at Gettysburg style, but she never really makes a mistake. And remember, she actually beat Obama in the debates 8 years ago, not the election, but the debates. So I think that what she, all she needs to, so there's nothing technically she's going to really get wrong. It's thinking about transferring every question that Trump is sure to ask about her email and her crookedness and her husband and Benghazi and everything else. Say one sentence of comeback and then say, but the real point for America is blah, blah, blah. And I know, because I heard it, that the mental image in her team's mind is the Benghazi Commission and Trey Gowdy. If she thinks of Donald Trump as Trey Gowdy and just keeps knocking him back one after another, that was actually her best as a public performer, I think.
But so you don't think there's any one issue that she actually needs to be worried about?
Well, and I'll ask you, I mean, she knows what people don't like about her. They like that.
Does she, though, really?
She must. I mean, she's a smart woman.
Absolutely fair.
That's like the fundamental Clinton question. Does she understand? I mean, with the email controversy, it was literally pulling nails. There was such reluctance. And you hear this from inside the Clinton campaign. The Clinton team knew that was a problem. It was the candidate herself who was so resistant to admitting, to even conceiving that this was truly a problem and then grappling with it. And this is the problem, I think, with, if you look at Clinton as a candidate, I think there is team acknowledgement about soft spots, but to the degree that the candidate has sort of internalized the weaknesses and understands them and is sort of strategic, I'm not sure, I don't know about that.
Well, that's what makes your average American look at her and say, you think you're above the law and you're above the rules of like normal society. Like that's how people view the Clintons, and I think the Clintons may actually think that about themselves. I don't know enough. I don't know them at all, so I don't know. But I think at a minimum, this sort of like unwillingness to acknowledge that there's a problem with setting up a server at your house that like is going to be how you're going to communicate with people when you're Secretary of State and you are Hillary Clinton. Like that seems like an obvious problem to your average person. Right?
Well, yes,
right?
and I don't want to draw.
Yeah.
There are issues that Trump has as a candidate, which one would argue
Yes.
are far more cancerous than even the things that we just laid out for Clinton. I mean, just sort of facial discipline in the debate would seem to be a question. Like, will he be able to control the like? I can't even do it. My face isn't rubbery enough, and I have a pretty rubbery face. His discipline in terms of preparation, understanding, patience, not lashing out. These are all hanging questions.
So here to be my hypothesis about how Hillary comports herself. As you look back over the long history of debates, probably 2/3 of the things that people remember are spontaneous. It's Rick Perry forgetting about things and Jimmy Carter sort of walking into Ronald Reagan's line. Probably 1/3 of them are planned, like Lloyd Benson's "I knew Jack Kennedy." You know Jack Kennedy. If Hillary Clinton were thinking about the spontaneous-seeming planned thing to say, it might be saying, as she once did a couple of months ago, that unlike her husband and unlike her predecessor, Barack Obama, she is not a natural at these things. She has a lot of things to work with, but not being a natural charmer. And if she can make that a sort of, in the unfair gender politics of public life, make that something she knows and leads with, I think that can be a planned, spontaneous revelation.
I want to get to a sort of, a searing indictment of ourselves, which is the media's role in all of this. And there's been a lot of talk about what the moderator's role is in this debate. Lester Holt from NBC will be moderating this after what a lot of people think was less than stellar performance on the part of Matt Lauer from NBC. And I guess I wonder, let's start with the obvious. Is it Lester Holt's job to fact check, John?
Yeah, of course it is. Yes, that's crazy. This whole notion that it's not is insane. I mean,
Janet Brown, who is the executive director, I believe, of the Commission on Presidential Debates, was interviewed on CNN on Sunday and said she did not think it was the moderator's job to be the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Well, I think Jim Lair did, and with all due respect to them, they're all great people, and Jim Lair's an amazing journalist, and one of the icons. But they're also working in a world that just does not exist anymore, and they think they are. And like the world that they think is going on is a world where presidential candidates won't get up and say crazy ass things that are clearly not true. Like, Lester Holt's a Democrat, for instance, right? Like you just, saying something because you think it might be true, so you just say it as if it's fact. Or I did not support going into Iraq. Well, you did multiple times, but so they see it as like, well, there's back in the day when presidential candidates would talk in nuances, there was a more gray area for a moderator and reporters, but now there's no gray area. Like that's a lie, and you just call it as such.
Go ahead.
So I recognize this as being different from an interview show, and Lester Holt's job is not to sort of interrupt and say, well, do you mean to say X, Y, and Z? But I think there is a historical example that shows what he both can and should do. That was back in 1976, back in the Stone Age when I was working for Jimmy Carter. I was there at the debate where he had with Gerald Ford, and Gerald Ford made a well-intentioned but really stupid-sounding comment that Poland was not under Soviet domination. And Max Frankel, from the New York Times, one of the panel of questioners said, "Excuse me, Mr. President, do you really mean to say that?" And so I think that's the kind of thing where you are the representative of the truth. And so I think you can't do, Lester Holt can't go back and forth in 6 rounds with Trump about his opposition, his fictional opposition to the Iraq War. But I think he can follow up and say, well, excuse me, Mr. Trump, but how about X, Y, and Z?
Can I just say, I'm quoting Jonathan Chait, who has a different opinion, and he writes about it in New York Magazine, and I think there is some truth to this, which is liberals suffer from an earnest tendency to place inflated hopes in the power of truth-speaking journalists to solve our political dilemmas. And he points to Candy Crowley in the 2012 debates, who fact-checked and was widely seen as being on the side of the liberal media or somehow a shill for the Obama campaign and not actually a journalist doing her job. And I think that in this moment in particular, where, you know, there is this narrative that the media is the mainstream liberal media is out to get conservative candidates. I mean, is there not a sort of a hope of course correction on the part of a lot of, well, liberals that the media can somehow solve this problem and reconcile it?
You know, actually, I would be interested to see if we find, given the rise of the alt-right, because the reason that Candy got nailed was because she was a woman, right? Like that was gender.
Say that again. The reason Candy got nailed is because
she was a woman, right?
Yes.
Like it was gender bias, right? Like 100%. I see what you did there. That's cute. Yeah. But I think it'd be interesting to see if we see conservatives try to raise questions, especially if Lester raises objections or fact checks on anything involving Black Lives Matter or the police, if those questions come up because he's black. That would be interesting. But I think he's not, it's going to be harder for them to come at him, frankly, because of that, because they don't feel comfortable going at a man the way that they feel going at a woman.
Yeah,
I think
they would
that's
never go against a black man who is president, for example.
Well,
right,
yeah, but
right.
Well,
that there's that.
That's a very fair point. A very fair point.
But what do you think of that, Jim? That this is sort of the hope that somehow reality can be brought back into this campaign if just somebody. I mean, this goes to the larger criticism that the media sort of invented Donald Trump.
So I'll make first the meta point, then the debate point. I've been doing on the Atlantic site for the last 3 or 4 months now, sort of a daily chronicle of things Donald Trump says that nobody in this position has ever said before, and that would have, stopped any previous nominee. And it's clear to me this is not changing a single mind among his supporters, and that's not my intention, but just to sort of document what's known about him. And similarly for Lester Holt, his job, I'm not saying he should do this because it will change opinions for the debate, but it's an important part of the journalistic role to say, you're saying X, last week you said Y, can you reconcile these two things? And not just, I think that Matt Lauer, when he sat there, what Trump was saying, I was against the Iraq War, that was a cautionary example that shouldn't be repeated.
Okay, so running on that, I guess I wonder whether the media is sort of implicated in this, insofar as Donald Trump, if you're going to call them lies, has been lying from, he announced his candidacy June 16th of last year, right? And all of a sudden we're having a conversation about fact-checking. Why is that?
Well, because I think we allow this to happen as non-TV media anymore. We have been. The print media has been doing this. I mean, Andrew Kaczynski on our team has basically since day one, every day, his people and he have been writing multiple stories about crazy things that Donald Trump says that aren't true. Just every day. That's been his job for over a year. The Post has done a great job with this. You guys have done stuff on this. Like, there are tons of examples, I think, of the broader media doing this. The problem is that for your voting public, they still get most of their media from television. And television networks have been garbage on this. They've been absolutely terrible. It is one of the most shameful things to have watched. That, it's been horrible to watch. Like, they allow his... Corey Lewandowski is being paid by his damn campaign and is on CNN every night talking about him. It's just like Baghdad Bob up there, like, doing his little deal. And it's out of control, right? That's nuts, right? And I think that's a shame that they're going to have to deal with, going forward.
Well, it remains to be seen whether the shame... Right. We'll move on past that question. Jim, you, again, in this great piece, have a really interesting... contention. Well, not contention, but I'll quote it. You write, when television began, advertisers learned that facts can get them in trouble, but hyperbole is safe. After decades of conditioning, the American public no longer looks for specific facts. So is it consumer culture that has brought us to this point?
I think so. So this was something where I was quoting a guy who says the FCC or the FTC, if you say this beer will, allow you fly to the moon, that's that's no trouble because nobody believes it. But if you say it will make you 1 inch taller, you have to prove that. I think that the larger merger of entertainment and advertising culture on one side and news culture on the other. 20 years ago, I wrote this book called Breaking the News, which was sort of warning against this as a possible thing that might happen. Now, just take it for granted that somebody whose training is as a reality show star and whose signature moment to me is from World Wrestling when Donald Trump shaved Vince McMahon's head. I think that's sort of the symbol of selection. I think that it's just gone so far that advertising and everything else, politics, at least on the Republican side this year, is entertainment, and we're dealing with the consequences.
I would just say, and I tweeted about this earlier, there have been nearly 700,000 minutes in this campaign. And I find it dismaying, possibly depressing, possibly terrible that the next 90 minutes are going to matter so much. Because when we talk about hyperbole and the sort of circusification of American politics, not that I don't love being here with all of you guys and on this stage with you, but there have been a lot of moments that have mattered, that have been really substantive, and we haven't paid any attention.
Yeah, I agree with you, but also if you look back at 2012, my boss Ben Smith, love Ben by the way, decided 40 minutes into the first debate to call it for Romney and put a story out 40 minutes into the debate calling it for Romney, and he was right. Romney won that debate. I think that helped. That moment, though, was when the American public started to focus on it. And certainly if you are an Obama supporter and if you were working on the campaign at the time, you looked at that and were like, holy crap, we're going to lose. And they turned around their entire campaign, I think, as a result. He came back into that second debate and was much stronger. He was sort of the Obama of old that people remembered that had the soaring rhetoric and made everybody want to love him. And I think that these are the points that matter. It sucks that the last 2 years of hell don't matter to anybody but us that went through it, right?
You don't know what we've been through.
But this is the moment that everyone cares.
If this makes you feel any better for Ben calling that 40 minutes in, 2 weeks before that, I had a big story in the Atlantic saying Obama would lose the first debate because incumbent presidents. So the Atlantic and BuzzFeed were as one on this, and he came back, and so this is. This
very
debate,
good about that decision now.
Will really matter tonight, and there'll be another one. But I do think this is more important than any comparable debate in a while because Trump and Hillary Clinton are so different in every way, starting with gender.
Let me ask you, because there's been I won't say a mea culpa, but there's so much attention on this. There's been so much hand-wringing by the media about the media. Do you think there will be the same level of sort of, for lack of a better term, glibness during the debate, after the debate, calling it for one person or another, Jim?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So,
okay, let me ask you guys a historic question because I think a lot of people feel like we are at a point of no return, that this is, and certainly in terms of technology, we haven't been here, and sort of media, but in terms of candidates, do you think that there is a comparable period in American history?
I'll give you two of my meta theories in one. One is that basically everything is going well for the United States now except national politics. Deb here and I have been traveling around the country for a couple of years. City by city, you find reinvention going on, people paying attention to schools, but our national politics they're not the worst ever because there was the Civil War.
Right.
But they are.
There was that.
So I think that this is a really troubling time for national politics, and there has never been somebody like Donald Trump who's gotten this close to the presidency, with somebody with no experience in public life, with no temperamental control. So I think it's a serious issue.
It's unprecedented, you think?
I think I've traveled in a different part of the country. But the part of the country that I'm in is a lot of very angry people, and it's weird. They can be well off, right? Relatively speaking. I'm not talking about super poor people, but well off, middle class, lower middle class people that are not struggling to pay their bills day to day necessarily, but they don't have a whole lot. Even if the recovery is affecting them, they don't see it, and they look at their politicians and they see a bunch of corrupt bastards that they don't trust, that have lied to them for generations, and they hate them, and they hate politics, and they want someone to come in and basically light the building on fire and like start over, and that leads to Trump, and then Trump uses that hatred, and it's very easy for him to target Mexicans or to target Muslims or something like that, and gets them spun up even more and more and more, and that to me, as an entire country, probably not since the 1940s, late 1940s, early 1950s, as the civil rights movement was sort of picking up, and we saw massive amounts of like lynch mobs in this country. I don't think we've been as bad as we have been since then.
So this is for discussion later on, but my impression is from Western Kansas, from South Dakota, from Mississippi, that people feel some hope about their immediate area.
Yeah.
But they think, there was a wonderful story after the Republican convention that said, GOP delegates think economy is going to hell except where they live, which is sort of the, I think, the story this time. And Trump is gifted at whipping this up, especially with a racial angle.
I guess we have only a few minutes left. And I know there's a robust bar scene back there, but maybe people can keep it down a little bit. I guess my question to you is there any chance there won't be a second debate? Could this be it?
We're dealing with Donald Trump, so anything is, you saw those caveats in my story of if there are debates, et cetera, so I'll assume
So you
there's
think
another
it's
one.
still a distinct possibility?
Anything this year is possible.
The only reason I don't think there's a possibility is because it would make him look like the biggest punk in America. If he was like, oh, I'm not going to go debate Hillary Clinton again, like, everybody would be like, what's wrong with you?
I think I tend to agree that he's like bound by some amount of ego to do the next two.
But how about if he says, oh, I just whipped her so good, there's no point in doing this anymore. He did that at the end of the Republican debates.
Right.
Yeah, I can see not doing the third. Like, I could see him doing and being like, I did it twice, I'm good.
At least one more. I think there is a looming question, John, to your point, about whether there will be any kind of general consensus, is there such a thing as bipartisan media consensus at this point, about who actually won this?
No.
No.
I mean, no. And
We have consensus on this.
Right, we do have consensus.
I mean, as Trump has proven, though, like, even when he loses debates, he wins. So certainly with people who like Donald Trump, he's definitely going to win. Like, there's zero chance. He could light himself on fire on the stage, and they'd be like, that man just won by lighting himself on fire. It's amazing.
Let's hope
Clinton
there's no
can't light himself on fire.
self-immolation.
And just a 5-second point is what he's doing in a few minutes is different from anything he's ever done before in his life. Because in the primaries, there were a bunch of people. He could just pick them off one by one and then just stay silent when he didn't want to talk. So this is going to be different. But you're right, for his supporters, self-immolation would be, oh, great, look at that.
Well, you could say for his adversaries, self-immolation would also be a boon, but that's getting into details. Okay, so we have just a few minutes for a quick break if anybody needs to make a dash to the men's or ladies' room before the cast of Hamilton performs live. Just kidding, that's not happening. But it is Hamilton live, so I had to make the joke. I do want to thank my compatriots, my fellow media commiserants, Jim and John, for joining us. And thank you to our underwriters for making tonight possible. We're sorry we said bad things about television media. And thank you to our audience for coming and participating and sharing in the goodwill or despair of this evening. We'll be back. Well, we won't be back, but Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will be back in just a few minutes. So stay tuned. Thank you.